One, two, three.
Hello, friend. The Mystical American Patriots Society is transmitting to you from our secret ice fortress and laboratory high in the Swiss Alps. This is a variety program for normal sandwich-eating Americans with some concerns about living in a deranged, post-Christian technocracy. Keep your third eye on the sky and your ear to the ground as Sumo and Smokestack direct your attention to a higher dimension. Are you ready? Stand by.
Hello and good morning, friends of all flavors and dispositions. It is your co-host and producer, Smokestack, coming to you solo today. I'm afraid I have some very sad news to share about our brave commander and leader, Sumo. Last night there was a coordinated attack upon his spaceship, his orbital broadcasting platform, by the Jesuits, and they were assisted by Vladimir Putin. And there was a pitched battle in the ship. Sumo fought them very bravely. They were surrounded. Enemy robots were able to enter the ship, doing severe damage to the control systems. And while fighting them off, Sumo was trapped in an airlock door. And the robots vented the airlock into space, and while Sumo was trapped in the door, all his innards were spewed forth from his butt into space. And so he's still up there, hanging dead in the vacuum of space, with all his guts just flying out from the spaceship. And so I'm sending up a robot satellites in to see if we can collect all of his innards and reconstitute and reanimate his body. And I'll give you more updates on that as they come available. But that's what's going on right now. He fought very bravely. You can all be very proud of Sumo, even as we mourn his complete evisceration and the loss of all his internal organs to the vacuum of space. So it's just me today. I think the pace of the show is going to be a little more relaxed. But there are a few, I think, helpful conversations that we can have today. And we are going to talk about Ukraine a little bit. But first, I want us to set the insanity and the fear of nuclear war aside for a minute. Forget all the propaganda that you've seen on the television about the Russian menace pillaging Ukraine, and just let's rewind a couple weeks before all this was a big deal. I want to go back in time to Canada. I want to go to Canada because there are some hard lessons that we can learn from the trucker protest. Now, you'll recall we did an episode right before the action got hairy in Ottawa, where we were basically saying that the trucker protest was somewhere between a giant fake op and a trap. And it ended up, Sumo took the position that it was a big fake op for the most part, and I took the position that it was a trap and that people were going to get J6'd and this whole thing was going to get used against them. And I think history has proven me right. It was a trap, and there was a lot of fake stuff going on. And so Sumo was also right in a lot of his analysis of that event. And I don't want that event to go by without some important reflection, because As we said before, we understand. We know why people went. They want to fight against tyranny that is trying to force them to take experimental, dangerous injections that have been now conveniently wiped from the news cycle. Hey, by the way, where'd Fauci go? I haven't heard from him in a while. I don't know if he retired or something. But all that's been swept by the Ukraine situation. It's all been swept away. And a lot of justice has not been done, and a lot of lessons have not been learned. So we're going to go over that event because there's a lot that we can learn from it. But even though some restrictions were dropped and they were given some sort of symbolic victories, I don't believe that the requirement for truckers to get vaccinated has been withdrawn. Also, it would appear that if you're not vaccinated in Canada, you're Canadian, you cannot leave the country. I've seen a little bit of conflicting reporting about this, but it does appear that to leave the country, you have to get vaccinated. That's absolutely insane. And it's a new development. I think that policy, I know it was difficult before, and there may have been some issues like getting into the United States. But I think that restriction is somewhat new, at least in some of its enforcement. Also, using the protest, which was peaceful. I mean, they did no damage. They didn't burn down any buildings. There was no violence. But using that protest as a pretext, the government of Canada had its own little Patriot Act moment and seized for itself police state dictatorial powers to basically do anything they want. And they were able to freeze people's bank accounts. They have people held without bail on silly charges, including Tamara Litch, who was one of the organizers, held without bail, which is pretty hardcore for somebody who has not committed any violence of any kind and did no damage whatsoever to the country. And so these new powers, even though the emergency order seems to have been withdrawn voluntarily by Trudeau, maybe a couple days after it was extended by Parliament, it's now clear that anytime you people get out of line, they can snap right back into place without even a vote. It looks like, and all your assets can be taken. Your crypto brokerage account will cooperate with the Canadian government and freeze your custodial wallets. Your bank will sell you out. They will freeze your account, and that can go on for as long as they want it to. And then they can, if they're feeling nice, they can withdraw it. And that's a new situation. Like, that's not something that the Western mind has ever really had to accept as reality. And all that was brought to you by was premised upon this protest. And so that's an unfortunate and avoidable situation. You guys, when you did this protest, you fell into a trap, and you gave the people that are trying to destroy your way of life and install a tyrannous globalist regime over your government and people, you gave them pretext. Now, would they have found some other way to do it? Yes. Do you need to oppose them in some way? Do I need to oppose them in some way? Everybody does. Yes. Was protesting the right move? No. Protesting is gay. Okay? Listen. Before I get into my list here, here's the deal about protesting. There are only two purposes for actual protesting, like marching in the streets, waving signs, honking horns, filling the street with people, shutting down the city. it never does anything. It never does what it's advertised to do. It does not help your cause. Never. Okay, in reality, there's only two kinds of protest. The first kind is a protest that is organized by the ruling party itself of the government. The powerful political movers will organize this thing to give pretext to the thing they already want to do. Okay? If you have a bunch of people marching in the streets for free healthcare, and then the government says, okay, we're giving you free healthcare. All right? The protesters and the government were working hand in glove there. Right? In that scenario, the reason that protest happened was to give the approval or the appearance of popular support for the political measure that maybe isn't there. Because I don't think most Canadians, when that went through, I don't think most Canadians wanted free healthcare. They just did it. Most Canadians are not communists, at least the ones I know. But it went through, and anytime you have protesting of that sort, it was organized by the politicians to give them the appearance of public support or sway opinion. Because if you turn on the news, if you're just a news consumer and you turn on the news and you see protesters in the street, you think, oh, this must be what everybody wants. Okay? And then you will not oppose it as firmly as you otherwise would have, right? So that seeing that protest that is a creation of the government itself is going to mute your opposition to the thing if you are opposed to it. Because when you see big crowds of people, you do not feel it's not even rational. It's just like a psychological response to it. You don't want to oppose them. You don't want to be part of the spoil sports or the minority. You fear reprisals. You don't want to appear out of touch. You don't want people to think you're a square. Look at how much fun the protesters are having. It's such a beautiful moment. Maybe I should just support it too. Maybe I want to be a part of that. I want to be a part of history. Maybe I'll support it now. Maybe I didn't think so before, but I saw these appeals from these protesters and their passion, and it really inspired me to think that, yes, this is it. Like, these are all the things that they're trying to get out of that protest. So that's a protest that's friendly to the government and operating on its behalf. All right, second variety of protest. That's a trap, okay? That's what you saw in Ottawa. Shady people working for the government laid a trap for their opponents and talked them into doing dumb stuff, and then that was used against them. Okay, January 6th, same thing. A bunch of federal informants and shady people organized a siege of the Capitol and talked a bunch of people into storming the Capitol building. Who opened the magnet locks on the doors, by the way, because there's video of that. But I'll lay that aside. That was a trap, and it was used to justify certain political actions that would come from it. Okay, and it was used to discredit and make the political opponents look bad. Right. So that's what you had in Ottawa. That's what you had on January 6th. It's a trap. In neither one of these cases was this really a bunch of people. Now, people thought they were, and some of the people, I would say most of the people at those two, Ottawa and J6, were there for honest reasons. Like the participants that got sucked into this thing were there because they wanted redress of their grievances, and they felt powerless, and they're like, we need to stand up. And then somebody handed them and said, oh, we should do this thing. Here, this'll work, and handed them this big dumb trap. And they were like, okay, because they don't know what effective resistance looks like. They have no experience in it. They're very excited and angry. And they're like, oh, finally we'll show them. And so they fell into a trap. And so let's all take a moment here and go over a few lessons from this trap, from this bad experience, okay? Lesson number 1. Don't project your values systems onto your enemy, okay? Don't assume because you believe in right and wrong, and there are things that you would never do to a human being, that your opponent also has some standard of right and wrong and has some view or appreciation for the value of a human life, or there are things off the table for him. That it isn't the case. You cannot assume that. But because people always want to project their own ways of thinking onto other people. That's why you get into weird conversations where someone will go off ranting about a topic in a way that they're just assuming that you agree with everything they're saying. This happens a lot with people you don't know that well, or maybe you've just met, and people that are very sure of their opinions and free will go off on a big, hey, it's like, come on, what are we doing? And they'll go off on this big thing, and they're assuming that you agree with everything you're saying, and you're sort of nodding, right? Because you don't know this guy, you don't want to get in an argument, but they have every belief. So they're making a huge in debate and interpersonal communication. They're making a huge mistake by going off with these opinions, assuming that you agree with them without ever finding out what you think. That's a mistake on the part of the speaker. The same principle is operant here. If you apply your own value systems to your opponent, it makes you completely unable to anticipate his actions. Okay? And in the case of the powerful government opponents of freedom, they know this. They know that you will do this, right? It is your weakness, not theirs. Your enemy doesn't believe in right and wrong. Your enemy, your opponent, only believes in power and acquiring it. Okay? Your enemy hates you and is not dealing with you honestly or in good faith. There are good people that work in different government jobs, okay? I'm not talking about your Aunt Betty who works for the health department and helps poor people get rid of lice, okay? I'm not talking about her. I'm talking about the entity, the integrated entity of the government that is taking away all your freedom, okay? That is imposing experimental vaccinations on you. That's the entity I'm talking about, and it's a super organism of all the people involved, and mostly of the people higher up, and then the people who are legally outside of its authority structure, who nevertheless have huge amounts of influence upon its actions and its agenda. Okay, that's what I'm talking about. That opponent hates you and is not going to deal with you honestly or in good faith. You cannot trust them. They don't just disagree about, your conflict with them isn't just that you disagree about the best ways to achieve a healthy society. Okay? That's Pollyanna view of politics. That is not what we have in the West anymore. We had it at certain times. We still have it at certain places like city councils and county commissions and all that sort of thing. Like it's still out there, but at the big national geopolitical level, that view of what politics is very naive, and it is hurting you to believe it. Okay, your enemy does not care that you only want your freedom. All right, you can say, look, I'm not trying to hurt anybody else. I'm not trying to take anybody's stuff away. I just want freedom. I just want freedom. Is that so wrong? Your enemy doesn't care about your freedom. He doesn't want you to have freedom. Your opponent hates your freedom. Do not project your value systems onto your enemy. It's causing you to make huge mistakes. Huge mistakes. Okay. That was lesson number 1. Lesson number 2. You guys seriously need to learn how to recognize a trap. Okay? And don't listen to people who encourage you to walk into them. Now, on the run-up and the whole Canada trucker protest thing, there were a lot of high-profile, conservative talking heads that know better in the media that were cheering Canadians to go to Ottawa and show that government what for, and you're gonna make history, and you're gonna turn back these evil mandates, and we're gonna show them. They'll see the truth now, and they can't stop us. Right? That was like Jack Posobiec, guys like that, who know better, who should know better, that this was a giant trap, and this and what they were claiming was going to happen was never going to happen. Okay? The ambassador of Honkistan or whatever he was calling himself. That's stupid. And they should not be encouraging people, normal, well-intentioned, conservative Canadians, to run headlong into a trap. Especially after January 6th. Like, get your head out of your butt, guys. Right now I'm talking to the people in the right-wing media that were encouraging ordinary Canadians into this nonsense. Like, I bet it got you a lot of clicks, a lot of likes on Facebook and Twitter, right? I'm sure it was really good for your... I'm sure it drew a lot of people to donate to Turning Point USA. But you were encouraging people into a trap. And then when the whole thing blew up, you're like, oh, I remember Ottawa. Oh, man, this is a tragedy. Oh, feel so bad for them. No, I'm not buying that. Right-wing people need to be smarter than that. And when you see media personalities who are, a sales funnel for some Washington D.C. like lobbying group, don't listen to them. Okay, like, I know they have good takes on stuff, and they're really good at owning the libs, like Shapiro and I don't know, a bunch of other guys. But they're hustling for a Washington lobbying group. Okay, that is, we went over this on leadership in the right wing. If that's their affiliation and that's who they serve, you don't want to listen to them. You don't want to show up in Ottawa or Washington D.C. because they said it was cool and they were, waving flags and cheering you on. That's a mistake. Okay. Those guys are sales funnels for Washington D.C. lobbying group. They're not looking out for your interests, and they're not going to help you when you're in jail without bail. Okay. So we need to, instead of listening to those people, we need to learn how to recognize a trap. So ask yourself this question first. Is the action proposed a symbolic gesture, or will it have real physical or propaganda effects? Will the effects be attributable to you personally or to other people involved? And is this good or bad? You've got to sit down and game that sucker out, okay? What are the effects? What's the outcome? How do you get to how does this action follow through to a satisfactory end state of achieving your goals? Okay. If you were to ask somebody with the trucker protests, they would probably say something like, we're going to make the government wake up and realize that the people are against this, and they're going to have to see the light, and they're going to have to change. Why do they have to change? They already know you're against them. They know everybody hates them. They don't care. Okay? This doesn't work. You can't game this thing out to a positive outcome. Right? You have no ability to force them to do anything just by honking and throwing a rave in downtown in winter, as Sumo put it. This doesn't get, they don't care about the light, and you're not going to make them see it. Right? Again, don't project your value systems onto your enemy. If you were, because you good people out there, if you were a manager in a business and you managed 50 people, and one day all 50 of them came together and signed a petition to stop making us wear orthopedic shoes. They look really ugly. Give us some different shoes while we're at work. And they all came to you, and you could just fire them all, probably. But would you? No, you would be like, okay, I understand. The shoes are ugly. I will get you some nicer work shoes. Okay, we're gonna change the uniforms. That's not your opponent. Your opponent does not care. They don't have to acquiesce to any of your goals, and protesting will not get them there. Right? That's what I'm talking about here. Will this have real physical or propaganda effects? Also, is this going to, will the effects be attributable to you personally? Right? Sometimes you want them to be attributable to you personally. Sometimes you want to be the guy that puts the win on the board. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you need to be acting anonymously, and you need to figure out which of those things apply in the situation and make the decision whether or not to participate. Also, does the successful end state of the action require your opponent to see the light, back down over bad optics? This is a losing action. Your enemy doesn't have to do this. I know I'm repeating myself here, but that's very important. Don't do anything if the goal or the so-called effect of this is going to be to make them see the light. Okay, we're not operating in that world. All right. Also, will the proposed action expose your identity or subject you to focused electronic surveillance? Okay. Like the Freedom Convoy, like J6, all these participants were exposed. All right. I guarantee you that they had large amounts of electronic surveillance assets all over the town, and they were getting everybody's identities. They were tracking your cell phones. They were taking pictures of everybody. There was no way to participate in that protects your freedom. Okay. Your phone was being like stingrayed, guys. If you went there and took your phone, it's over for you. Okay. They've got your identity. This is a side point, but don't take your freaking cell phone everywhere. If you're going to participate in stuff, leave your phone at home. Get some other way to communicate. Okay. Get some ham radio handsets or something. That phone is not your friend. Okay. It is not helpful to you. Here's another question. Does the action give your enemy narrative pretense to proceed with the next phase of his strategy against you? This is why your protest got you martial law. The protest didn't get you freedom. It got you martial law. All right? The question, does the action you're undertaking give your enemy narrative pretense to proceed to the next phase of his strategy against you? Yes. Yes, it did. That's exactly how it worked out. Your peacefulness or your righteousness, the righteousness of your cause are irrelevant here. The truth is irrelevant here. Only narrative power matters. Okay? Who's writing the story about what's happening? If you're a protester in Ottawa, it isn't you. You don't have control of the media. They do. Okay? You have no power there to write the narrative. The person, this is not honest politics. This is slimy, spook geopolitics. And the guy writing the narrative wins. And that wasn't you, protesters. Okay? You ran into an ambush. All right? And so let's translate this thing to a battlefield scenario. If you were at war, would you take a large portion of your force and run them unarmed into the enemy's stronghold and run around honking and whooping it up? Would you do that? No, that would be completely retarded. You would not do that. Here's the thing. Politics and war are the same thing. They're two sides of the same coin. So don't do anything in politics that would be stupid in war. Okay? This is a good rubric for decision making. Don't do anything in politics that would be stupid in war. All right? Protesting in war, taking a protest-like action in war is stupid, and that will just get you killed, right? And that's exactly what happened in politics too. It just got all these people totally murked by the little tyrant Trudeau. Okay? You got to get smart about this. Politics and war are the same thing. All right. Now, Last question you got to ask yourself about this movement that you're considering joining, or this action you're considering taking with lots of other people. And we've covered this on the show many times. Does anyone's name involved in the leadership of this protest event sound like a childish sex joke? Okay? One of the leaders of the trucker protest is called BJ Dichter. Benjamin Dichter. BJ Dichter is his name. BJ Dichter. Right? Anybody remember George Floyd's old kindergarten teacher that kept all his essays all these years? Her name was Waynel Sexton. You guys remember Waynel Sexton? Okay. I don't know why they do this. We've covered this on the show a bunch of times. It's crazy. But when these things come out, there is, not every time, but there is usually somebody involved that's super shady, that disappears afterward and never gets in trouble, and their name is some ridiculous, like middle school sex joke that that middle schoolers would snicker at if their substitute teacher was named BJ Dichter. Okay, so what about BJ Dichter? He is a former Conservative Party of Canada Minister of Parliament candidate that founded LGBT Tory, a conservative LGBTQ advocacy group that calls themselves the Rainbow Conservatives of Canada. The Rainbow Conservatives of Canada. What did we talk about in the segment a little while back about how to identify bad leadership? Purity tests of the right. Do they subscribe to degenerate sexual practices? If so, do not trust them for leadership in the right. BJ Dichter is an LGBTQ advocate in the conservative wing of Canadian politics. Like, it can't get any... I couldn't be more correct about this if I tried, okay? How many weeks ago was we did that segment? Perfectly applies here. All right. I know I'm taking big victory laps here. I'm trying not to flex too much. But if you protesters had all listened to the show and applied the lessons, you would not have gotten taken for a ride, and you would not be in jeopardy now. Okay. So look, I'm serious. And if Sumo were here instead of floating in bits out in space, he would agree. It seems silly to look for people's names that sound like sex jokes, but this is 100% reliable. Okay? There are many examples of this that you can go back and listen to the shows we've done on it. And I think, who was maybe Owen Benjamin, who kind of spearheaded this idea. And so he really gets all the credit for this concept, and we're just kind of carrying on his work here. But This totally works, and you need to be really using this tactic to identify untrustworthy leaders. Okay, BJ Dichter. All right, next point. I believe this is point 3. You need to get serious about your privacy and information security. Okay, most of you have zero discipline in this regard, protesters. This lesson is going to be painful for you because now your bank account is frozen. Maybe it's unfrozen at this point. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if it's unfrozen at this point. It doesn't matter if they didn't take all your money. You know it doesn't matter. People are going to have their bank accounts frozen because of posting support on social media for convoy protests. This totally happened. Okay, some lady donated $50 and got her bank account seized. Learn this lesson here. This is the nugget here. The internet is enemy infrastructure. The internet is enemy infrastructure. You can use it, but you need to use it with that knowledge in mind and make decisions about your stuff, okay? This isn't complicated, but you do need to educate yourselves about how to protect your identity in certain situations, whether it's just posting on social media, what you post and what you share and what you choose not to share. If you're going to support somebody financially, maybe you find a way that you can do it anonymously. There are ways to do this. There are ways to get a spoof credit card. There are ways to use crypto and such to make donations. There are usually options for this that don't immediately expose you. I mean, if somebody in the government is going to track you personally down, and they're after you, they can do it. But what I'm talking about is getting caught in a dragnet, okay? Because what they're doing is they're swooping through and they're getting all the low-hanging fruit. So with privacy and information security, just don't be low-hanging fruit. Learn how to protect yourself. We're not going to go into those lessons today. But if you're going to be politically active in any way, even if you're not, today, just do the thing. Get your stuff together on this point. You need this. Don't be a low-hanging fruit. Don't be a sucker. Don't get caught in a trap, okay? Right? How many people could have gone to that protest and been just fine had they not brought their phones with them? Don't bring your freaking phone, okay? Or get a burner or get some other means to communicate. It is possible. I know, like, your grandma on Facebook that wants to go do something dumb probably isn't capable, but some of you can help your grandma on Facebook, okay? Some of you can have a talk with her. It's like, all right, Mom, if you're going to go to this thing, here's some precautions you need to take so you don't get your bank account frozen. All right? The people on the right have to start thinking this way, and so we're going to keep getting owned. All right. Also, don't trust the emissaries of your enemy. It was touted throughout the protest that the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and the leadership of the protest had a great relationship and they were communicating and No, they were setting a trap for you. Everything they say is said with the purpose of ensuring their victory and your destruction. They do not want peace. They want power. If they're negotiating with you, they're leading you where they want you to go. All right? Don't trust them. Don't be a sucker. Okay? Doesn't mean you can't talk to them, but you need to understand that they are lying to you. People, especially people on the right, don't understand that, and I'm not a cop hater. I judge cops on the individual basis or the department or the city level basis, okay? Some police are great, honorable men, and some police departments do excellent work ensuring the peace and fairly enforcing the law, okay? That's not, at the federal level in your big capitals, your big liberal cities, that's not really the case, okay? Sorry. I know there's good guys that work. I know your Uncle Bob, who's been a cop for 40 years. It's a good man. But the reality of this is that the institution itself is corrupt. It does not care about fairness. It does not care about your free speech. It doesn't want peace. It wants power, just like every big government institution does. Okay? So don't trust them. No, they can lie to you. They do lie to you with impunity. All right? Police lie to subjects all the time. They lie to them to get them to confess to things. Okay? It's allowed. They will lie to you. All right, enough about that. Here's the thing. I can hear people objecting. Well, if we can't protest, are you advocating violence? What are we just supposed to go out and kill people? No, you are not. No, I'm not advocating violence. Okay, and maybe in some way I will get into the particulars of what what methods I do advocate. But for now, don't fall into the false binary that protesting and violence are the only two options. Okay. They're not. There are many options. And you can learn some of these options by looking at what your opponent, the globalist World Economic Forum tyrant elected official, learn from him. What is he using against you? Is he using espionage against you? Is he using propaganda? He's not using protesting. He's not. Protesting is not an effective strategy for a dissenting political minority under a tyrannous opponent. Okay? It's not. If your goal is lasting political change via nonviolent means, Then start learning propaganda and espionage. That's what your enemy is using against you, and it is working. You need to be better at those things. By learning those disciplines, you also learn how to counter them. You need to be better at espionage, counter-espionage, and propaganda operations than your enemy is, if you want to win peacefully. Okay? It's legal for them to lie to you. It's legal for them to spy on you, right? It's legal for them to use influence operations against you. Those are the methods that they are employing against you. Maybe you need to learn those same methods and figure out the principles behind them and how to bring them to bear at the local level. Also, you need a geographic base of support and material. And you need the other infrastructure. You need infrastructure that's not under control of your opponent. Start locally, right? You are powerless in Ottawa. No matter what methods you use, you cannot win in Ottawa, right? You walked into a big ambush with no escape, no logistics support, no narrative control, and no means to achieve your desired end state. Don't do that. Don't do that. Part of effective political action is establishing a power base. Okay, think about how party politics works in your country. Every political party has its base of power, geographically, demographically. If you don't have that, you don't have political power, right? So you have to build that first. Just being a diffuse, uncoordinated bunch of people all over the country that are mad doesn't get you power, right? And, politics and elections are lame and gay, but at the local level, you can sometimes do a lot by taking over the school board, by taking over city council. And then when you do that, you can use the power of that office. You leverage the power of that office to achieve your goals. Okay? If the local sheriff of your county is on Team Freedom, right? And you got him in office, you and your 100 friends got him elected, and he's on your team, that you can use that to your advantage. This is what they do. The district attorneys in big cities, a lot of them, their campaigns were financed by George Soros, and he is using them, and the World Economic Forum people are using these district attorneys to destroy these cities, to cause mass internal migration in America, and send a bunch of liberal voters into Texas. Okay? That's what's going on. You have to start thinking this way if you are going to win. All right? Short of violence. You have to think this way anyway, no matter the conditions. So it's not hopeless, but you need to be shrewd as a serpent and innocent as a dove, okay? Jesus didn't tell us to be shrewd as doves and innocent as doves. Shrewd as a serpent means stop getting taken for a ride, okay? Stop getting taken for a ride. Stop trusting your opponent. They are lying to you. Quit getting ripped off. All right? So, thus ends my lessons from Canada. And I hope that it reaches people that need to hear it. Because if you guys keep getting run into traps like January 6th and the trucker protest, you're not going to make it. Not going to make it. So, I got a question. Before we get into some stuff about Ukraine, I have an honest question, and maybe some of our listeners can help me out about what's going on in Ukraine. And this is a little bit technical, but I think it's an important point, and I think the answer to it will help us understand what's happening. And I really don't know the answer. It's an honest question. There's been a lot of hay being made about the Russian failure to establish air superiority in Ukraine. Okay. There are still Ukrainian Air Force assets doing damage out there, which is surprising to a lot of people. It's like, why are the Russians rushing in using cav and infantry and field artillery without establishing air superiority? That's a great question. Why are they doing that? There are some strategic scenarios where they could do that, but I find it weird that the Ukrainian Air Force is being able to affect what they're doing when Russia owns some really impressive surface-to-air missile systems like the S-400 that they could deploy from Belarus and enforce a no-fly zone over the entire Kiev region. And it doesn't even have to be in the country. And they haven't done that. And I'm really wondering why they haven't done it. And they've been holding back other assets too. We haven't seen their heavy bombers in use. But specifically with the S-400, I'm really wondering why that hasn't been deployed. And why Ukrainian Air Force is being allowed to operate out there. And maybe one of you guys, I know some of you guys are skilled military strategists. Help me out, and I will, next episode, if I get an answer, I will talk about that. And I think whatever the answer is, I have the feeling that it will be valuable for understanding what's going on at the strategic level. Now, with regard to Ukraine, there's a lot of hyped up war propaganda going on. The narrative is shifting. COVID is over. You're never going to hear about COVID again, probably. And this is a real big pivot. Real big. And everybody's ready. Everybody's ready to stop talking about COVID. I know you don't want to talk about COVID. You don't want to talk about vaccines. You don't want to hear about it. Especially when there's something a lot more interesting on the table. And I can't help but feel like that's really convenient, especially when all that information about the vaccines was starting to come out. Sure is convenient that we have this big, scary new narrative ready to go and wipe the mental slates clean of the entire world so that the questions and the reporting on the vaccine effects will stop. Seems really, man, that really worked out well for Pfizer and Anthony Fauci. But I digress. There is no reason with this thing, all this war propaganda going on. Don't feel like you have to have a dog in this fight. You don't. You don't have a dog in this fight if you're listening to this show, probably. Unless you're Russian or Ukrainian, which I don't know, maybe we have some listeners. If we do have some listeners in Russia or Ukraine, I would love to hear from you. You can use the contact form at mapsoc.org if your internet still works and Western websites aren't being censored from your internet access. Please let us know how you're doing. Maybe chime in on this S-400 question. But anyway, most of you don't need to have a dog in this fight, okay? There's a lot of pressure to hate Russia and support the brave Ukrainians, okay? This is propaganda. This fight is about local Eastern European political issues that go back a long way. And we'll go over a little bit of history in a minute. But just to start with, you don't need to have a strong opinion about who should win here, or which side are the good guys and which are the bad. You can, but don't be pressured into it by propaganda or people in your life that are demanding that something must be done. Something must be done, right? No, I reject that. If something must be done, the burden of proof is on the person calling for something to be done, to prove why something must be done, and they better be able to prove some serious American strategic interest. Like, I'm not taking it for granted that America needs any involvement here whatsoever. Okay? That needs to be proven. And you're not going to do it by just like making me feel upset about how horrible Vladimir Putin is. Okay? Sorry. I'm not getting sucked into picking a side here, either side really, and you shouldn't either. Whoever's making their case had better prove it, and they'd better understand the history of the region. So let's go over a little bit. Let's go back to the 90s under President Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton sort of initiated the the aggressive, offensive expansion of NATO. First countries to join were Hungary, Czech Republic, and Poland. Now, Poland, I kind of understand. They hate the Russians so much. It almost makes sense. But why in the 90s, when the Soviet Union had collapsed, late 90s, the Soviet Union had totally collapsed, the Berlin Wall fell, Russia was in tatters. The whole former Soviet Union was in tatters. Their will to fight was gone. Why keep expanding NATO? Why further entangle the U.S. into mutual defense obligations with tiny European countries that most people couldn't point to on a map? And I'll stop here and say, like, the importance of joining NATO and what that means for Americans. Every time a country joins NATO, we are committing our blood and treasure to their defense for really any reason, right? So how many of you would rend your garments and pour ashes on your head if Bulgaria was attacked? Okay? By, I don't know, Azerbaijan. How many of you would care? Is that your business? Well, it is your business now because they joined NATO in 2004 under Barack Obama, along with Estonia, Lithuania, Romania, Slovenia, and Latvia. And we now have a inviolable mutual defense agreement with them. And if Slovenia is attacked by dastardly Moldovans, we have to commit our men and our money and our equipment, and supposedly every other NATO ally does too, to go and defend Bulgaria, because that's so strategically important for the U.S., and it makes perfect sense that we would enter into that agreement with them. So hey, American, more people joining NATO doesn't make you more powerful. Okay? NATO isn't even America. It's an international military association. You don't govern it. You don't vote. Anybody know who the commander of NATO is? Shout him out. I bet most of you don't, even though he's been in the news a lot lately. But I'll tell you what, you didn't vote for him. He doesn't represent your interests. So then in 2009, we also added Albania and Croatia. And in 2014, we tried to add Ukraine. Now, Ukraine, in 2014 and before that, was a close ally of Russia. They supply much of Russia's food. They're sort of a breadbasket of Eastern Europe, really all of Europe. And Russia heavily invested in gas pipeline infrastructure to access the European gas market, which is a huge component of what this is really about. But I'll maybe get into that in a minute. So in 2014, how would you get? Why would a government closely allied with Russia join NATO, an organization that is in its very the whole purpose of its existence was to counter the Russian military menace, which now by the 90s doesn't really exist anymore, at least for America. Why would Ukraine do that? Well, they wouldn't. So we threw billions of dollars and a lot of spook intelligence support into an overthrow of the Ukrainian government. The government was overthrown, and we installed a new government that was Western friendly and wanted to join NATO. right? So this imagine if Iran overthrew the government of Mexico, sponsored a coup in Mexico, and installed a caliphate that is committed to the destruction of the great Satan. I think maybe America would be a bit upset about that. We might even have reason to take some military action to prevent it. Okay? That is what that's what happened in Ukraine in 2014. Now, Ukraine is a very fractious bunch of people. There's Polish Ukrainians, there are Ukrainian-speaking Ukrainians, there are ethnic Russian Ukrainians. They don't get along. In fact, if without the intervention of the U.S. and Russia, alternatively throughout the years, Ukraine would probably look a lot like Yugoslavia if it weren't being held together by big globalist powers. So when this 2014 overthrow of the government happened, a lot of those ethnic Russian areas seceded. One of them immediately joined Russia in the Crimean Peninsula, and then two others declared themselves to be autonomous republics. And it's been that way. And so then the new government in Kiev proceeded military operations against them, and that area of eastern Ukraine on the border with Russia has been at war ever since, trying to put down this rebellion. And also, I want you to imagine if there were wars and shelling going on in Canada right on the border with Detroit. America might have, reason to get involved in that situation. Just asking you to consider this. And also, going back to the expansion of NATO, we got Montenegro involved. 2017, Montenegro. So now, if Yemen launches a missile at Montenegro, your sons and your daughters may be called to the defense of Montenegro. Okay. Just want you to know what you're involved with there. So, going back to the 2014 overthrow of the government. Now, when this happened and the regions in eastern Ukraine seceded and the fighting began, according to the rules of joining NATO, a country that's not in control of its territory cannot join NATO. You have to be in full control. That way somebody can't join and immediately get us into a war. So the government in Kiev has not been able to get Ukraine into NATO. And then this has been going on ever since then. Now, lately, since Biden came to power, there has been some talk about some options of getting Ukraine into NATO, despite the mess that it has been, despite all the bloodshed that has been going on since then. That hasn't really gotten a lot of news, but war in Ukraine is not new. Okay, there's been war going on since 14, or roughly. The Biden administration has been considering a few options. How do we get Ukraine into NATO? Option number one, give up. Give up on the expansion of NATO, which I think would be the wise option, but that's not what they want. Option number two, redraw the border, excluding the seceded areas, and join NATO as a smaller nation. That was under consideration. And three, retake the seceded areas by force. And that is the option that has been pursued ever since, is war in the two breakaway republics. Now, I don't think there's been a lot of war in Crimea because for the longest time, for decades, the Russian Navy has had a military base in Crimea. They leased it from Ukraine, and that is one of their major military bases. And so when Crimea seceded, it was already full of Russian equipment and troops. And so the regional government of Crimea, which was already supposed to be a sort of an autonomous semi-autonomous area, sort of like Hong Kong used to be. As soon as the 2014 coup happened, the regional government of Crimea said, "Hey, Russia, will you please defend us against the army heading towards us to retake us right after they seceded?" And the Russians said, "Well, sure." And so they just moved some assets up from the port of Sevastopol, I believe it's pronounced, on the sea up to the border with Ukraine, and that was easily handled, and that has not been attacked. Although they have cut off the water supply, the Ukrainians did dam up the canal which runs through the Crimean Peninsula, and they've been having a water crisis ever since. So that's your history on what's been going on in Ukraine, okay? And I've tried to not be overly sympathetic to the Russian position, but instead, we need a better reason in our consideration of the situation to explain Russia's actions than Putin is crazy, Putin has long COVID, okay? Because I'm seeing this narrative all over the media. People are saying, "Oh, Putin's gone insane. What's wrong with Putin? Why would he take this incredibly crazy action against the peaceful democracy of Ukraine? Does Putin hate freedom? Is he on drugs? Has he blown his mind out on crack cocaine? Does Putin have long COVID? Does he have brain fog? I think Putin's got brain fog, and it's causing him to invade the Ukraine." That's what the Western media is presenting as Putin's motivation here. Okay, and that's stupid. That doesn't help anybody make a good decision about what to do, if anything, about the situation. That is propaganda. That is not real consideration of the facts on the ground. So, in giving you this history of the region, at least since 2014. There's really a lot more to it than that I'm not going to get into, because frankly, I don't know very much about it. And I would like to get a Russian history scholar in here to talk more about it at some point, but we'll see. If you can just consider the facts of the region and give an assessment that I know sounds like I'm some sort of Putin apologist. I'm not. I don't support war in the situation by either side. But setting that aside, you as a Westerner who, with their fractional political power and they're just looking out for your own informedness and trying not to be led astray by propaganda, you need to understand the history of the region. And you need to understand the true motivations of all involved parties. And so this information is important to you. Don't get sucked into dumb propaganda about Putin having long COVID. I just every time I hear that, I want to slap the person saying it. It's so stupid. So now, our buddy Oddman over at the Odd Man Out at the Oddcast podcast would probably have a lot more and thoughtful things to say about this, but I think it bears noting that Bill Clinton was a Rhodes Scholar. Now, who was Cecil Rhodes? Cecil Rhodes was the creator of the British Empire for all intents and purposes. He was the empire builder. And upon his death, he devoted his vast fortune to the establishment of the Rhodes Scholar program. And the express purpose of this, which you can read about in his last will and testament, which is on Amazon, you can buy a copy of it, is to establish the English-speaking race as forever dominating the world. His position was that English-speaking people specifically, not just white people, but English-speaking people, and all the culture and the beliefs and the traditions that come along with that, are the deserved inheritors of world power, and they should control and dominate the entire world forever. and that was his mission in life. Throughout most of his life, his goal was to accomplish this through the British Empire. And after it became clear that the British Empire was not going to get there, he later in life said, okay, we'll do it with the Americans. And by the time of his death and at the establishment of the Rhodes Scholar Program, his life was, all his fortune, his life's work was to be dedicated to establishing the English-speaking people through the vehicle of America to dominate the entire world. Okay? You can read about it yourself. That's what the Rhodes Scholarship Program is about. Now, Bill Clinton is a Rhodes Scholar. Lots of important and powerful people are Rhodes Scholars. You've heard that term before. You just didn't know what it meant or what the history of it was. Also involved in this is something called the Project for a New American Century, which basically Leo Strauss and all his acolytes, the neocons and all that stuff, all the guys that he trained, the premise of this was basically similar to Rhodes, is that we've got to control the world. And a huge key to that is you have to control the Eurasian landmass. Okay. And so NATO has become the vehicle of the Cecil Rhodes people and the Project for a New American Century people to achieve American dominance of the world. And part of that strategy is control of the Eurasian landmass. And you can look all this up. Look up PNAC, Project for a New American Century. That document is available. You can read the PDF, founding document of their PDF, and all their stuff that they've written, and the teachings of Leo Strauss. It's all out there. And so when you got to ask yourself the question, why did we keep expanding NATO and entangling America in all these defense agreements with these piddly Eastern European countries after the Soviet Union had collapsed, after the Russian economy was in shambles, and none of those former Soviet countries posed any threat to America whatsoever, or even Western Europe. At that point, they basically reverted to crumbling. Their industry was crumbling, and most of their pursuits were agricultural at that point. Why continue to entangle America in all those defense agreements? Why devote more resources to this giant military machine that has bases all over the place in Europe that you pay for with your tax money? Why keep doing this? Well, it's because of Cecil Rhodes and the Project for a New American Century pursuing its goal of America dominating the world, and part of that strategy is controlling the Eurasian landmass. So there you go. There's a lot of motivations put forward on both sides as for why everybody cares about Ukraine. And we'll see. But if you think, going back to our question earlier, if you think you know why the S-400 missile system has not been deployed to secure the airspace over Kiev, please let me know, because I'm very curious, and I think that's important. But anyway, hopefully, I think we're going to wrap the show here a little early. I'm sorry it's a short show, but I did not have time to secure a co-host when I'd seen the horrific video of all Sumo's innards being spewed out and crystallizing in the cold vacuum of space. That was only really a few hours ago, and I did not have time to secure a co-host, so we have a short show today. I hope that's okay with everybody. I know it was a little bit more serious and lecture-y than usual. I know I can do that, so I'm sorry if I've bored you. But hopefully Sumo will be reconstituted. All his internal organs are going to be thawed. We're gonna have to clone some pieces. He's basically turned inside out and frozen right now. So we're gonna have to turn him right side out. Put all his guts back inside of him in the right order and warm them up and thaw them, and then electrify him in some way to reanimate his his body, much like we did for Albert Einstein after we executed him. So wish us luck on that endeavor, and hopefully you'll be hearing us both on the air real soon, like next week. It's been fun talking to you guys today. Thank you for listening to my lectures. I hope they were helpful. And you guys have a great week. Have a great week.
Targets up here, we just had something go right over the top of us that, I hate to say this, looked like a long cylindrical object that almost looked like a cruise missile type of thing moving really fast that went right over the top of us.